Elara Voss stood silently behind the young apprentice, Kes Marlowe, whose fingers were trembling as they hovered over the delicate compass. The faint glow of projected star charts flickered on the glass panels surrounding them, casting ghostly blue light across the cramped space. Outside, the floating continent of Skyfold stretched endlessly in the dark, shifting currents of air moving like unseen rivers beneath their fleet. Kes's brow furrowed, lips pressed into a thin line of concentration. "The readings don't match," she whispered, voice barely above a breath. "The compass is spinning again." Elara's sharp eyes narrowed. She took a slow step forward, the soft leather of her boots muffled on the floor. "Show me," she said quietly. The apprentice handed over the instrument, a battered brass compass with a cracked glass face. Its needle quivered erratically, refusing to settle. It was the same compass that had betrayed them hours earlier, thrown off by atmospheric interference caused by the unstable air currents that wove through Skyfold's uncharted skies. "It's the storm brewing ahead," Kes said, her voice tinged with panic. I miscalculated the drift. We're off course." Elara's jaw tightened. How far off? Kes swallowed hard. Too much. "If we don't correct soon, we'll miss the waypoint and risk running into the border patrols." The air in the cabin grew heavy, thick with unspoken fears. The expedition was already stretched thin, with every misstep risking disaster. Elara's mind raced, weighing their options. "We need to adjust immediately," she said, taking the compass from Kes and kneeling beside her. "Let me show you something." Outside, the airship groaned as the wind shifted, a low thunder muttering through the clouds. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the jagged edges of distant floating isles. The crew moved with practiced urgency, securing rigging and scanning the horizon for threats. On deck, Urek Thorn leaned against the railing, his usual cocky grin replaced by a rare look of concern. He watched the approaching storm with narrowed eyes, the scar over his left eye catching the faint light. Despite his brash demeanor, there was an unspoken respect for Ilara's steady command. Below, Mira Solon adjusted the delicate instruments in her workshop, her silver hair catching stray glints of starlight. Tauren Vex, broad-shouldered and scarred, paced near the armory, ever vigilant. Back in the navigation cabin, Ilara's hands moved with practiced precision, steadying the compass needle. "Feel the weight here," she instructed softly, guiding Kes's fingers. "The currents can fool you if you only look at the instruments. You need to sense the air, the stars, and trust your instincts." Kes nodded, swallowing her fear. She closed her eyes briefly, breathing deeply, then opened them with renewed determination. Together, they adjusted the course, the needle finally settling. "Better," Elara said, a rare softness in her voice. "You're learning." A flicker of a smile crossed Kes's face. "Thank you, Captain." Elara stood and placed a firm hand on the apprentice's shoulder. "We all make mistakes. It's how we recover that defines us." The storm outside intensified, winds whipping against the hull, but the fleet held its course. The crew's unity, fragile yet unbroken, was their greatest strength. As the night deepened, the stars emerged once more, guiding them forward into the unknown. But the skies of Skyfold were never truly calm. The broken compass was a reminder not just of the dangers outside, but the inner struggles each of them carried. And for Kes, the road to becoming a true navigator had only just begun. Elara's gaze lingered on the young apprentice, a silent vow forming in her heart. No matter the storms ahead, she would see this campaign through, not just for the mission, but for the crew she was coming to trust. And somewhere beyond the shifting clouds, Captain Rivencale's shadow loomed, waiting for an opening a crack in their resolve. But tonight, the broken compass was mended, and with it, a flicker of hope. The journey continued. Elara Voss stood by the large viewport, eyes tracing the shifting clouds of Skyfold's uncharted skies. The air was heavy not with the usual anticipation of discovery, but with an oppressive weight she could almost taste. She wasn't alone. Lena Orris, the expedition's communications specialist, sat at the console, fingers flying over the keys, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Elara, you need to see this," Lena said, her voice low but urgent. She turned the screen toward her. Encrypted messages, intercepted from unknown sources, flickered across the display. The codes, once indecipherable, had started to unravel thanks to Lena's expertise. Elara leaned in, her heart tightening. The messages weren't just random chatter, they contained coordinated plans that matched suspicious incidents the crew had experienced recently. Malfunctioning equipment, delayed communications, and unexplained detours. Someone on their own ship was feeding information to outside forces. Who could it be? Elara whispered, the betrayal settling like a stone in her stomach. Lena shook her head, eyes scanning the data. The patterns point to someone with access to our internal systems. It's subtle, but consistent. The revelation spread through the crew like wildfire. Trust, already fragile, began to crack openly. Yarrick Thorne was the first to act. The rugged sky pirate captain cornered the suspected crew member beneath the flickering lights of the lower decks. His voice was sharp, his usual bravado replaced by cold resolve. "I don't tolerate traitors," Yarrick growled, his scarred face inches from the accused's. "You've endangered all of us." "Why?" The accused avoided his gaze, sweat beading on their forehead. "You're playing a dangerous game," Yarrick warned, the metallic clang of his fist hitting a nearby pipe echoing through the corridor. Meanwhile, Myra Solon retreated to the quiet sanctuary of her workshop, poring over logs and data streams. Her calm exterior belied the storm of worry brewing within. Each anomaly she uncovered added weight to the suspicion that betrayal was not a singular event but a symptom of deeper fractures within the crew. Torin Vex, the security chief, doubled his patrols, his broad frame a constant presence in corridors and airlocks. His piercing blue eyes scanned every face for signs of duplicity. The tension was palpable. Alliances once taken for granted now felt like fragile threads ready to snap. Elara found herself retreating to the deck during moments of solitude. The open sky, once a symbol of endless possibility, now felt like a vast expanse filled with unseen threats. She stood beneath the shifting clouds, the wind tugging at her braid as she wrestled with the weight of leadership and the sting of betrayal. "How do I lead a crew divided against itself?" she murmured to the empty sky. But even in isolation, Elara refused to succumb to despair. Her gaze hardened with resolve. The mission depended on her ability to restore trust, to find the fissures and mend them before they split the expedition apart entirely. In the days that followed, she convened meetings, speaking openly about the betrayal and urging transparency. She encouraged the crew to voice their fears and suspicions, to turn suspicion into vigilance without succumbing to paranoia. Gradually, cracks began to close. Yarrick softened his approach, balancing suspicion with reluctant trust. Mira's discoveries led to improved safeguards, sealing vulnerabilities in their systems. Torin's presence reassured the crew, his unwavering loyalty a beacon amid the turmoil. Lena worked tirelessly to intercept further communications, turning the tables on their saboteur by feeding false information back through secured channels. Through it all, Kes Marlowe watched, absorbing lessons in leadership and resilience. Elara's mentorship became a lifeline, a symbol that even in the face of internal darkness, hope could persist. As the chapter closed, the crew stood at a precarious crossroads. The betrayal had shaken them, but it had also forged a new, if fragile, unity. Elara's leadership was no longer just about navigation through the skies. It was about steering her people through the storm within. The question lingered in every whispered conversation and every wary glance: could they truly trust each other again? The answer would shape not only their journey, but the fate of Skyfold itself. And somewhere beyond the drifting clouds, Captain Rivencale watched, his cold grey eyes gleaming with the knowledge that the expedition's greatest threat might not be the skies, but the shadows they carried within. The air was thick with the scent of aged stone and forgotten history, a tangible reminder of the lost Skylands whose secrets they sought to reclaim. Clad in her usual practical attire, the silver strands of her hair caught the flickering light from the handheld lantern, casting an ethereal glow around her determined face. "This place, it's unlike any sight we've charted before," Mira murmured, her voice low yet firm as she approached a metallic panel embedded deep within the cavern's heart. Her tools, meticulously arranged in a leather pouch at her side, were her constant companions, instruments capable of awakening the dormant wonders of this forsaken archive. Elara Voss stood nearby, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings with a blend of caution and anticipation. The navigator's lean frame was tense, every muscle attuned to the delicate balance between discovery and danger. "If this archive holds what you suspect," Elara said quietly, "it could change everything for us, and for Skyfold." A soft clink echoed as Myra carefully removed an ancient cover plate, revealing beneath it a console etched with glowing glyphs and intricate markings. The light pulsed faintly, as if stirred by their presence. Mira's breath caught. This technology, it's the origin, the very foundation of what keeps the Skylands afloat. Yarek Thorn, ever the skeptic, leaned back against the cavern wall, arms crossed over his rugged chest. His sun-bleached hair was tousled, and the scar over his left eye seemed to deepen in the dim light. "Looks like a relic to me," he teased lightly, though his voice betrayed a hint of awe. "But if it gives us an edge against Kale, I'm all ears." Mira ignored the jibe, her fingers dancing across the console, coaxing it to life. Holographic schematics flickered into existence, bathing the chamber in blue light. Complex machinery, floating cores, and energy conduits shimmered in three-dimensional detail. The ancient engineers had been masters of their craft, their technology far beyond what the crew had imagined. Elara stepped closer, her eyes reflecting the cascading images. This could explain the shifting borders, the instability we've encountered. If these mechanisms degrade or fall into the wrong hands. A sudden tremor rattled the cavern, loose stones tinkling like rain. The crew instinctively braced themselves, hearts pounding as dust cascaded from above. The fragile silence shattered, replaced by the urgent thrum of danger. "Stay alert," Elara commanded, her voice steady despite the tension. "We're not alone here." Yarek's hand went to the hilt of his sidearm, eyes scanning the shadows. No surprise if Kale's mercenaries have found their way in. Myra's discovery had thrust them into a new chapter of their campaign, one where knowledge was both weapon and shield. The hidden archive's secrets promised power, but demanded vigilance. As the air shifted with the threat of conflict, the crew understood that their mission was no longer just about reclaiming lost lands, it was about safeguarding the very future of Skyfold. Elara met Myra's gaze, a silent pact passing between them. "We must protect this knowledge, for the sake of all who call the skies home." The cavern seemed to hold its breath alongside them, the weight of history pressing upon their shoulders. Outside, the winds whispered of coming storms, both in the skies and in the hearts of those who would fight for dominion over the floating continent. As the crew prepared to secure the archive, the boundaries between ally and adversary blurred, and the true campaign for Skyfold's destiny began. Tauren Vex stood motionless on the bow of the flagship, his broad frame silhouetted against the darkening expanse. His piercing blue eyes, usually so steady and unreadable, flickered with a rare intensity, scanning the distant outlines of approaching ships. The mercenary fleet was closing in, grim, unyielding and ruthless. All hands, battle stations. Tauren's voice cut through the rising wind, sharp and commanding. The crew scrambled, the metallic clang of armor and the hurried footsteps echoing across the decks. Elara Voss, standing nearby, watched with a mixture of admiration and concern. The years had etched lines of hardship on Tauren's scarred face, but his presence was a beacon of strength amid the mounting chaos. "They're coming fast," shouted Lena Oris from the communications tower, her fingers flying over the signal interceptors. At least a dozen airships, heavily armed. Yarick Thorn tightened his grip on the controls of his own ship. The Vex's grim determination mirrored in the lines of his tanned face and sun-bleached hair. "Looks like they want a piece of us." Tauren moved among the crew with practiced efficiency, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "Defensive formation Alpha. Shields up, weapons ready. Mira, keep the engines running at max. We can't afford a crippled ship in this fight." Mira Solin nodded, adjusting the dials on the ancient engine core, her silver hair flickering in the gusts of wind. "I'm doing what I can, but these old machines won't hold forever." The first volleys exploded in the air, fireballs blooming like deadly flowers against the roiling clouds. The fleet rocked under the shockwaves, and the acrid smell of burning fuel mixed with the cold bite of rain. Tauren's heart pounded as he directed the crew, each decision a delicate balance between aggression and caution. "Return fire," he ordered, his voice rising over the cacophony. Cannons roared in response, spitting streams of molten metal that tore through the sky. The mercenaries pressed forward, relentless and merciless. In the thick of battle, Tauren found himself face to face with the brutal truths of war. His personal code, forged in years of mercenary contracts and hardened by a fierce sense of honor, was tested by the necessary ruthlessness of survival. He ordered a boarding party to repel an enemy ship, knowing the cost such close combat would bring. As the fight wore on, cracks appeared not just in the hulls of their airships but in the crew's resolve. Exhaustion gnawed at their spirits. Elara and Yarick clashed over strategy in the cramped command room, voices sharp with tension. "We can't keep playing defense," Yarick growled, pacing. "We have to strike back before they regroup." Elara's eyes were steady but tired, and risk more lives. "We need to hold the line, Yarick. We don't have the strength for an offensive yet." Their argument was interrupted by the distant roar of a collapsing hull and the cries of wounded men. Outside, the storm seemed to mirror the chaos of battle, relentless, unforgiving. Tauren returned to the bow, watching the enemy ships falter under the combined might of the expedition's defenses. Slowly, the mercenary fleet began to retreat, leaving behind a trail of smoke and shattered dreams. The fight was won, but the cost was steep. Several ships were damaged, and the crew bore fresh scars, both physical and emotional. Tauren stood apart from the others, the weight of command heavy upon his shoulders. His jaw clenched as memories of past battles flickered through his mind. Each decision had been a choice between survival and sacrifice. The mercenary in him understood the necessity. The man, bound by honor, wrestled with the consequences. Elara approached quietly, placing a steadying hand on his arm. You did what you had to do. We all did. Torin met her gaze, the storm in his eyes slowly calming. It's never just about winning, is it? It's about what we lose along the way. Together, they looked out over the battered fleet, the bruised sky above hinting at calmer days to come, but also warning of the challenges still ahead. The tides of steel had been weathered, but the war for Skyfold was far from over. As the crews set about repairs and tended to the wounded, a quiet resolve settled among them. The mercenary raids had tested their limits, but they had endured. And in the shadows of the storm, a new strength was forged, one that would carry them through the trials yet to come. Torin's resolve hardened. His personal code might bend in the crucible of war, but it would never break. For the sake of the crew, for the hope of reclaiming Skyfold's lost skylands, he would stand as their shield, no matter the cost. And somewhere beyond the clouds, Captain Rivenkale's shadow loomed ever larger, promising that the next battle was already on the horizon. The crew's fate hung in the balance, and Torin Vex was ready to meet it head-on. Elara Voss stood alone, her lean figure silhouetted by the intermittent flashes of lightning that revealed the roiling chaos beyond the vessel's fragile sanctuary. The wind howled like a living beast, whipping her dark braid against her cheek, but she did not flinch. Instead, her sharp eyes traced the swirling tempest as if seeking answers within its furious depths. She had always been drawn to the skies, the stars, her guides, and the wind, her constant companion. Yet tonight, the storm outside mirrored the turmoil within her own soul. The ghosts of past failures whispered in the gusts, chilling her resolve with memories of that fateful expedition. The one that had shattered her reputation and stolen the trust she once commanded effortlessly. Self-doubt gnawed at her, a relentless predator prowling the edges of her mind. Behind her, the faint clatter of footsteps approached, hesitant but determined. Garrick Thorne stepped onto the deck, his rugged frame tense beneath the worn leather jacket, sun-bleached hair damp from the mist. His scarred eye met hers, reflecting the same storm of emotions she fought to suppress. "You can't keep hiding up here," he said, voice rough but low, carrying the weight of unspoken worries. Elara turned slowly, meeting his gaze with a weary steadiness. "I'm not hiding, I'm preparing." Yarick's incredulous snort was swallowed by a burst of thunder. "Preparing, by brooding over what's already lost. We need you down there with us." She clenched her fists, the sting of his words both a balm and a blade. "You think I don't want that? But if I falter, if I make another mistake, we all risk that every day," Yarick interrupted, stepping closer. "But we don't crumble. Not if we're smart, not if we trust each other." The tension crackled between them like the storm outside, fierce and unyielding. Yet beneath the surface, a fragile thread of understanding wove through their shared resolve. They were bound by the same goal, even if their methods diverged. "Trust is earned," Elara whispered, the admission raw and vulnerable, "and I'm not sure I'm ready to give it yet." Yorick's gaze softened, the bravado slipping away to reveal the fierce loyalty beneath. "Then start with me." Before the storm could consume their fragile truce, a soft glow spilled from the corridor, drawing their attention. Mira Solon, her silver hair luminous in the dim light, emerged from the engine room, cradling a delicate contraption humming with ancient energy. "I think I've found something," she announced quietly, eyes gleaming with a mixture of excitement and caution. "This device could stabilize our navigation through the storm currents. It's from the Lost Skylands technology, more advanced than we imagined." Elara stepped forward, the weight of leadership settling anew on her shoulders. Mira's discovery was a beacon in the dark, a tangible sign that their perilous journey still held promise. "Good work, Myra," Elara said, voice steady. "Prepare it for integration immediately. We can't afford any more mistakes." Meanwhile, on the outer deck, Tauren Vex stood sentinel, his broad shoulders braced against the howling wind. The scars etched into his weathered face were a testament to battles fought and survived. His piercing blue eyes scanned the dark horizon, alert for any sign of threat amid the storm's fury. The crew's safety depended on his vigilance. The security chief's grim determination was a fortress against the unknown. The crack of thunder echoed his resolve, a reminder that despite the tempest both outside and within, they would endure. Back in the cramped quarters, Elara found a moment's solitude to confront the shadows that clung to her spirit. Faces of those lost haunted her friends, comrades, the innocent caught in the wake of her errors. The weight of guilt was nearly suffocating, but beneath it, a flicker of stubborn hope refused to be extinguished. She whispered into the storm, "I will not fail you again." Not this time. As the tempest raged, so too did the storm within Elara, fierce and unrelenting. Yet with each breath, she reclaimed a fragment of her strength, forging it anew in the crucible of leadership. The night was far from over, and the skies of Skyfold held even greater dangers yet to come. But for the first time in many moons, Elara Voss felt the stirrings of confidence, a glimmer of hope that the expedition might yet succeed against all odds. The storm was not just in the skies, it was in her heart, and she intended to weather it. The wind howled, a challenge, but Elara was ready to answer, and as the first light of dawn threatened the horizon, the crew braced themselves for the battles ahead, united by the fragile bonds forged in the storms within and without. The skies of Skyfold awaited, vast and unforgiving. But so did their resolve. Elara's journey was far from over.